The orphan's spear touched his neck. Lay a hand on my sister, human, and you will not wake again. Asterisk, the tavern fell silent the moment the spear touched his throat. Not a full-sized weapon, just a child's handmade shaft, trembling slightly in the orphan's hands, yet sharp enough to draw a bead of blood. Lantern light flickered over the boy's dirt-streaked face, revealing eyes that held storms far too old for someone so young. His voice, barely above a whisper, carried a deadly certainty that froze every drunk miner in place. Lay a hand on my sister, human, and you will not wake again. Across the room, the girl clung to a wooden pillar, shaking. Everyone wondered who were these children. The tavern did not breathe. It felt as though every flame inside had been snuffed out, every voice strangled before it could form, leaving the heavy silence to wrap itself around the room like a tightening rope. The spear was small, hand-carved, the wood uneven, the metal tip hammered crudely by someone who had only ever learned to survive, not to craft. But none of that mattered. It touched the man's throat with the certainty of a seasoned warrior's blade, and the slight tremble in the orphan's hand only made the threat feel more real, more unfiltered, more dangerous. The man who had lifted his hand toward the little girl moments earlier now sat frozen on his stool, his back ramrod straight, as if movement alone might slice his own skin against the spear's tip. His breath came in tight, panicked gasps that smelled of cheap ale and fear. One bead of blood, tiny but brilliant in the lantern light, rolled down his neck, and still, the boy did not blink. He looked small, barely 10, maybe 11, but his eyes told a story nobody in the tavern dared to interpret aloud. Those eyes were dark and hollow in a way children's eyes should never be. They carried something ancient, something wounded, something coiled like a trapped animal. And in those eyes lived a promise. He would kill this man if he took even one breath wrong. Apologize, the boy repeated, though his voice never shifted above a calm whisper, the kind of whisper that made the muscles in grown men lock up in dread. I didn't mean. The man stuttered, tears welling in his eyes. You lifted a hand. The boy pressed the spear just a fraction closer. That's enough. Behind him, half hidden by shadows cast from the swaying lanterns, his sister trembled uncontrollably. She had to be 7 at most. Her thin fingers clutched the wooden pillar beside her as though it were the only thing anchoring her to the world. Her sleeve was torn where the man had grabbed her, and a faint red mark was already forming on her arm. Her wide eyes shimmered not with tears, but with something like shock, as if this moment had pushed her past the place where crying was still possible. The tavern patrons watched with stiff necks and a kind of forced nonchalance, pretending they weren't invested, pretending they didn't care, but their gazes kept sliding toward the children, toward the spear, toward the man whose life now balanced on a razor-thin decision. Kid, let's not do anything stupid, the man whispered, voice cracking. The boy didn't move. His breathing remained steady, controlled, a chilling contrast to the shaking tavern floorboards that groaned under the tension. From behind the sticky counter, old Marika, grizzled man who had seen war, famine, and every kind of outlaw the rim had to offer, exhaled into his mug. He didn't look up. He didn't need to. Another outsider, he muttered into his drink, who picked the wrong kids to bother. The room shifted, the way crowded places do when everyone shares one thought but refuses to voice it. The orphan boy did not look away from the trembling man whose life dangled between apology and annihilation. Every nerve in the air crackled, waiting for the boy's verdict. The outsider swallowed hard. I'm sorry. All right. I didn't know she was. He cut himself off. The moment the boy's eyes narrowed. I was drunk, he corrected quickly. I wasn't thinking. You don't think around her, the boy said. If ever, there was no tremor in his words. Only command. Only the voice of someone who had been forced to grow old long before time allowed. The girl shifted slightly, pulling her knees to her chest, trying to make herself small. Her brother didn't check on her, but his jaw tightened, and something in the air suggested that he noticed every trembling breath she took. The outsider tried moving back an inch, but the spear followed him instantly, tracing his movement like the shadow of a hunter. He froze again, wheezing, please, don't. I didn't mean to hurt her. You did, the boy said, eyes darkening, and you're lucky I got here first. A heavy creak echoed from the rafters as a gust of wind pushed against the tavern walls, making the lanterns sway and the shadows stretch across the room like reaching fingers. The tension didn't break, it grew denser, thicker, more suffocating. Someone in the corner whispered, is that really him? The orphan, a veil rift. The outsider's eyes darted sideways. The whisper grew slightly louder, rippling through the patrons like a rumor that had already lived 100 lifetimes, the one that survived the collapse. Another miner breathed. When the whole settlement fell into the ground, the man at the spear's edge paled, his skin draining of color as sweat pooled at his collar. The boy didn't deny it. He didn't acknowledge it either. He didn't need to. His silence was confirmation enough. He leveled the spear without flinching. I said apologize. The outsider's voice cracked into a whimper. I'm sorry. I swear it. I won't touch her again. I swear on my life. A long silence followed. No one in the tavern inhaled. Even the wind outside seemed to wait for the boy's decision. Finally, the boy lowered the spear half an inch. The outsider gasped as though he'd been drowning, and someone had finally allowed him to surface. But the boy wasn't done. "Get up," he said, "and leave." The man scrambled, stumbling, tripping over his own boots as he backed toward the exit. The spear followed him until the very moment he reached the door, when he fled into the night. The tavern inhaled again, shakily, but the boy still didn't turn around. His sister whispered, barely audible, "Thank you, brother." Only then did he let the spear lower fully. Only then did he breathe. In the tavern, in that fragile moment, realized something chilling. The boy wasn't dangerous because he held a spear. He was dangerous because he meant every word he spoke. The boy lowered the spear only slightly, only enough to release the man from immediate death, not enough to release the tension that clung to the tavern walls like soot. The outsider stumbled away from the spear's reach, clutching his throat, his breath ragged and desperate. His chair toppled over behind him with a clatter that echoed unnaturally loud in the silence that followed. The tavern's light seemed to steady itself again, flickering as though relieved it had survived. Bottles behind the bar stopped trembling, but the people, they continued to freeze in half-sipped drinks, half-breathed words. Nobody trusted the moment. Nobody trusted the calm. The boy didn't chase the man. He simply watched him with a cold, unblinking stare that said everything. "I will remember your face. I will remember your scent. I will end you if this ever happens again." He did not need to voice the promise. The promise lived in the air around him, in the rigid stillness of his shoulders, in the quiet way he stepped back toward his sister. The girl, still pressed against the pillar, lifted her gaze. Her eyes were strangely bright, not glowing, not unnatural, but shining with a quiet resilience that didn't belong to someone so small. She clutched her brother's sleeve the moment he reached her, and he placed a hand over hers with a tenderness that contrasted sharply with the violence he'd been ready to unleash moments before. A hush fell over the room like dust, settling after an explosion. "That kid," someone whispered from a corner booth, the voice barely audible. "That really him?" The orphan of Vale Rift, the outsider, who had paused near the door, jerked his head in confusion. "What does that mean?" He crowed. That it was old Merrick who answered, wiping a glass with a rag that looked as old as his bones. He spoke without looking up, as if reciting a fact too heavy to meet anyone's eyes. "It means you should have walked away the second you saw him." The outsider's brows knitted. "He's just a kid." Merrick's chuckle was low and bitter. "He's what the rift didn't swallow." Several patrons murmured, shifting uneasily. The outsider looked around, confused and frightened by the implications. He didn't understand what collapse. He asked, voice cracking, "What are you people talking about?" A miner near the fireplace leaned forward, scratching his beard with dirt-lined fingernails. "Vale Rift. You ain't heard of it," he scoffed. "Figures. Outsider like you never knows the real dangers until they're chewing on his leg." Another chimed in. 3 years ago, whole settlement just gone. Ground cracked open like a beast yawning. Screams, then silence. Not even a trace afterward. People called it a quake, but quakes don't glow. The outsider swallowed hard. "Glow, violet," the miner muttered. "Just like, never mind." The table next to him went silent to silent. The boy stiffened but didn't turn around. The girl pressed closer to him, burying her face in his sleeve. The outsider took an involuntary step backward, toward the night outside. So what, those two survived it? Old Merrick finally looked up. His eyes were tired, but sharp. "They didn't just survive," he said. "They walked out of the ruins like the rift itself let them go." The boy's hand tightened protectively around his sister's wrist. The outsider noticed, but instead of pity, he felt a chill crawl up his spine. "Walked out," he echoed. "Just the two of them. No one else." Merrick nodded once. Everyone else vanished. Buried, consumed, lost. Merrick shrugged. "Choose whatever word lets you sleep at night." The outsider's gaze darted between the siblings. "So they're cursed. Or watch your words." The boy's voice cut through the tavern like a blade. He didn't need to raise it. He didn't even look at the man. But the outsider snapped his mouth shut instantly, as if instinct warned him of something primal beneath that quiet tone. The boy guided his sister toward an empty table in the back corner. She walked with small, shaky steps, occasionally glancing toward the door as if she expected danger to return at any moment. The tavern patrons parted silently as the siblings passed, giving them far more space than two children should ever command. One of the older miners whispered to his drinking partner. "Saw the girl's eyes earlier. They shimmered just for a second." "Light trick," the friend muttered, but the miner shook his head. "No, not light. I've seen that shimmer before, in the rift chambers, right before the walls move." A shiver passed through the room like a shared heartbeat. The outsider suddenly felt colder. The tavern felt smaller. The shadows seemed longer. He pressed his back against the wall by the exit, afraid to move, afraid to stay, afraid to breathe wrong. The boy sat with his sister, positioning himself between her and everyone else. He rested the spear across his knees, fingers still white from gripping it so hard. His face remained an unreadable mask, emotionless, focused. But the girl leaned into him, her small body curling like a frightened animal seeking warmth. The outsider finally found the courage to speak. Those eyes, what's wrong with her? Multiple patrons looked away at once, unwilling to answer, unwilling to admit what they suspected. Marek sighed. Wrong. Nothing's wrong, he said. What's wrong is what the rift left behind. The outsider felt sick. You mean they have powers? The boy's eyes flicked up, sharp and offended. We didn't ask for anything, he said quietly. The outsider's breathing quickened. Are they dead? The tavern fell silent. Every person there understood the weight of the question. Every person had seen the spear against the throat. Every person had sensed something in the air, a tension, a pressure, a whisper beneath the floorboards that didn't belong to anything human. Old Marek spoke last. Dangerous, he murmured. Only if you threaten them. The outsider stared across the room at the siblings, at the boy's steady posture and the girl's trembling glow. He didn't dare say another word. He didn't dare stay another second. Without a sound, he slipped through the door into the cold night, praying he would never cross paths with the orphans of Vale Rift again. But deep in the floorboards, a faint vibration hummed. And several patrons wondered if the danger wasn't in the children, but in whatever was waking beneath them. The night outside had turned brittle with cold, the kind that clung to stone and bone alike. The tavern windows rattled softly as the wind pressed against them, as if trying to listen in on the story unfolding inside. The boy sat motionless, his spear resting across his lap, but every nerve in his body remained alert, listening, waiting, guarding. His sister's small fingers curled around the fabric of his sleeve. She hadn't let go since the moment the spear touched the outsider's throat. She whispered, barely audible, "He would have hurt me." "I know," the boy murmured, his voice softer than the creak of a settling floorboard. "But you stopped him." "I always will." The girl lowered her head, but something fragile flickered across her features, a gratitude so deep it bordered on sorrow. Around them, the tavern had cautiously resumed breathing. Conversation sparked in strained murmurs. Chairs scraped gently. Drinks were poured with hands that trembled only slightly. Yet no one dared to speak too loudly, and no one dared to look at the siblings for too long. The terror had faded, but respect lingered, thick as smoke. Then the door slammed open again. Every head jerked toward it, but it wasn't another drunk outsider, nor a bandit, nor a man with cruel intentions. It was a local scout, breathless. Dust covered his leather armor, streaked with ash. He stumbled inside, gripping the doorframe for balance. "Marek," he gasped, "you have to tell the village elders." Now, old Marek went rigid behind the counter. "What is it this time?" he asked, though his tone already carried dread. "The rift," the scout panted. "There's light, the same violet light, rising again." Dozens of faces drained of color. "No," someone whispered. "It can't be, not after all these years." The girl stiffened instantly. She sucked in a small, sharp breath as if something invisible had pinched her lungs. The boy turned to her. "Do you feel it?" She nodded once. She didn't need words. Her trembling was enough. Marek let the glass in his hand slip, shattering across the counter, spilling stale ale in a slow, golden waterfall. "Tell me exactly what you saw." The scout swallowed hard. The earth was breathing again. "I swear it." The ground pulsed, like a giant heart under the soil, and the fissures, those old cracks, they were glowing. The tavern erupted in whispers and hushed curses. "Not again. What if it's reopening? We should evacuate." "What if the children—" "Quiet," Marek snapped. But even his voice shook out. The miner near the fireplace, one of the two men who had spoken earlier, leaned closer to his partner. "I knew it. I felt that vibration earlier. The rift is stirring. Maybe it's because of them." The boy's eyes flicked toward him, sharp and knowing. The miner fell silent instantly. Meanwhile, the scout spotted the siblings in the corner. His eyes widened with something like awe. "Or fear. You too," he breathed. "When the rift first collapsed, they said." The boy cut him off. "Whatever you think, don't say it out loud." The scout pressed his lips together, but the girl's small voice broke the silence anyway. Barely more than a thread. "It's calling." A chill slithered through every person in the room. The boy knelt in front of her, gripping her shoulders gently. "Ignore it. Don't listen." "I'm not listening," she whispered. "I'm hearing." Her eyes shimmered that faint, eerie violet, again the same glimmer the miner had noticed before but had been too afraid to describe properly. This time, more people saw it. Gasps rippled. Someone backed into a table so hard the entire row of chairs jostled. The girl blinked, and the glow faded. "I don't want to hear it," she said shakily, "but it's getting louder." The boy frowned, deep and troubled. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and straightened. "We need to leave." Marek slapped a hand on the counter. "Leave?" "Boy, if the rift is waking again, we need to prepare the entire valley." "With what?" the boy asked. "Axes, torches. There is nothing you can do against the rift." The room hung still. He wasn't mocking them. He was stating a truth they all knew but never dared say. "What about you two?" the scout asked carefully. "Everyone said you were changed by it." "We weren't changed," the boy said. "We survived." "That's not all," the scout whispered. "People say the rift marked you." The boy stiffened. The girl hid her face. The wind outside howled like a warning. The scout stepped forward, lowering his voice. "If it's calling to her, then maybe it wants something. Maybe it wants her back." A chair toppled over as someone stumbled to their feet, horrified. "Don't say things like that," the girl whimpered, pressing closer to her brother. He angled himself protectively, his hand tightening around the spear again. "We're not what the rift wants." Marek exhaled shakily. "Then what does it want?" For a moment, the boy didn't answer. His silence alone twisted everyone's stomach. "It's waking," the girl whispered instead. "It's hungry. It remembers us." The tavern felt colder than the night outside now. The boy stood, pulling his sister gently to her feet. "We're leaving before it tries to find us." "Find you?" the scout echoed, panicked. "You think it's alive?" The boy didn't look back as he led her to the door. But as he opened it, the wind blew inward, warm, not cold. Warm like a breath. The girl froze. "That's its breath," she whispered, and the door slammed shut behind them as if by an unseen hand. Every candle flickered, every bottle trembled. Every person realized the truth. The rift wasn't just waking, it was searching. The siblings stood just outside the tavern, swallowed by the night. The sky had turned a bruised shade of violet, the kind that didn't belong to storms or clouds but to something deeper, something crawling beneath the skin of the world. The girl clutched her brother's arm with both hands, her breaths sharp and uneven. He knelt down in front of her, leveling his gaze with hers even as the wind whipped at his cloak. "Listen to me," he murmured. "Whatever you feel, whatever it's whispering, you do not answer it." She nodded, but the fear in her eyes didn't fade. "I don't want to answer. I really don't, but it's stronger now than it's ever been. It feels so close. Like something huge is standing behind me." His jaw tightened, though his tone stayed calm. "There's nothing behind you. Only me." She made a tiny sound, not quite a sob, not quite a word. He wrapped his arm around her, shielding her from the rising wind. But even as he did, the ground shuddered under their feet. A soft vibration, barely noticeable, but long, lingering, alive. They both felt it. The tavern door burst open behind them and Marek stumbled out, lantern in hand. "Boy," he called, the flame flickering violently in the wind. "You shouldn't be out here. Not now. Not with the signs." The boy shot him a cold, shadowed look. "Inside is no safer." Marek's voice cracked. "If you're leaving the village, tell me where. We need to know where you go, for our own safety." "Our safety," the boy echoed quietly, almost to himself. "You say that as if we're the danger." Marek flinched, not because the boy threatened him, but because the truth in his voice cut sharper than any blade. "I don't think you're dangerous," he said. "But the rift, it's after you." The boy didn't deny it. That alone was enough to make Marek's lantern hand tremble. "Please," the older man pleaded. "If it finds you, what happens to the rest of us?" The boy stood, lifting his sister gently onto her feet. "That depends," he said, "on what it wants." Before Marek could respond, another tremor rolled through the earth, this one stronger, enough to rattle the stones beneath them and send dust drifting from the tavern roof. Villagers up the road began shouting, running, slamming shutters and dragging children indoors. The girl pressed both hands to her temples. "Make it stop," she whispered. "Make it stop, make it stop." He dropped to his knees beside her again, gripping her shoulders. "Look at me. Focus on my voice. Just mine." She squeezed her eyes shut, tears gathering in the corners. "It's whispering my name." He swallowed. "Ignore it. It's not talking like a person," she said through clenched teeth. "It's talking like thunder inside my bones." A streak of violet light suddenly flared across the distant horizons. For faint, it could have been mistaken for lightning. But the siblings knew better. The boy stood, keeping his sister tight against him. He scanned the distant hills, the jagged edges of the valley, the shadows rising like smoke. It was beginning. Marek took a shaky step backward. "We're doomed," he whispered. "No," the boy said quietly. "Not yet." He began leading his sister toward the path out of the village. It wound through dead grass and blackened trees, the ones twisted and warped years ago, when the rift first tore itself open. The night felt full of eyes, full of watching, listening, waiting things. The girl hesitated. "Do we have to go back there?" He didn't answer at first. "I don't want to," she whispered. "I know," he said softly, tightening his grip on her hand. "But if the rift is waking, staying here puts everyone at risk. They won't say it, but they fear you. They fear what will happen if you stay." She looked down. "Do you fear me?" He knelt again and lifted her chin so she had to meet his eyes. "Never. I fear what the rift wants from you. I fear what it will do to take you back." Thunder rumbled not from the sky but from beneath the earth. The trees shuddered. The air pulsed. "Then we should run," she said softly. He stared into the darkness ahead. "There's no running from something that can feel your heartbeat." Her fingers curled around his. Marek's voice called faintly behind them. "Where are you going?" The boy didn't turn around. To finish what it started. More villagers spilled into the streets, calling his name, begging him to stop. Reaching out with trembling hands but not daring to get too close. To them, the two siblings didn't look like children anymore. They looked like something ancient walking in young bodies, something marked by forces older than the valley, older than stone. The girl looked back once, eyes full of sorrow. "They don't want us here. They want to survive," he replied. "We can't blame them for that." Another violet flash lit the horizon, brighter this time, spreading upward like a bloom of poisonous light. She flinched. It's calling again. I know, he whispered. What if it finds us? He lifted her into his arms. Then we won't let it take you. His voice was steady, his heart was not. They disappeared into the night, the wind swirling violently around them as though the world itself was inhaling, waiting, preparing, because somewhere deep beneath the valley floor, something enormous stirred and the darkness answered back with a pulse of living light. The path leading toward the old rift was not a path anymore, it was a scar. Trees bent away from it as if afraid to touch the ground where it once opened. The earth there felt wrong beneath their feet, warmer than the night air, pulsing faintly, like the heartbeat of something buried alive. The boy carried his sister until her trembling eased, then set her gently on the ground. She clung to his cloak as both of them stared ahead. The horizon no longer glowed faintly, it throbbed with an unmistakable violet hue, rising and fading like breath. Every cycle sent a new shiver through the trees, rattling dead branches like bones knocking together in warning. You feel it too, don't you? She whispered. He didn't answer. His silence was heavy, it always was when he feared the truth would hurt her. A ripple of warm air rolled across them. It was gentle, almost tender, but so wrong it made their skin crawl. The girl's eyes shimmered again with violet light. She squeezed them shut and gripped her brother's hand, nails digging into his skin. It's calling my name again, she said, voice cracking. It says I belong to it. You don't, he said immediately. You belong to me. You belong to yourself. She shook her head. It says it remembers me. The boy's heart hammered painfully. He knelt in front of her and pulled her close. You are not going back. Do you hear me? No matter what it shows you, no matter what it says. Another tremor rolled through the earth, this one strong enough to knock loose stones down the hillside. The valley behind them flickered with torchlight as terrified villagers watched from their rooftops and shutter cracks, unwilling to follow but unable to look away. The girl lifted her face, her eyes glowing brighter. It knows we're here. A deep, resonant sound filled the air, not quite a roar, not quite a voice. It was the sound of earth tearing open somewhere in the distance. A crackling violet burst shot upward, splitting the sky for an instant. The girl gasped and clutched her chest. It's hurting, she whispered. I can feel it. The boy's breath stilled. What do you mean? Afraid, she said, confused, but also angry. Looking, he held her shoulders. Whatever you feel, whatever you hear, it is not yours. The rift has no feelings, no soul. It's a wound in the world. She looked up at him, tears streaming. Then why does it sound so alive? He had no answer. A second explosion of violet light erupted down with it. The distant mountains glowed from within, as though something beneath them was clawing its way upward. The air vibrated. The stones around them shook. Their skin pricked. The boy stood, spear in hand. Stay behind me. I can't, she whispered, stepping closer. It wants me to come forward. You're not going anywhere. Her voice grew even softer. It says my name. And your name? His blood went cold. What? She looked up at him, eyes bright and terrified. It says you were supposed to die that day. He froze. The rift tore wider in the distance, this time visibly, like a mouth opening across the earth, spilling violet light into the sky. The girl grabbed his arm violently. It says the world cheated. It says you lived when you weren't meant to. His heart slammed against his ribs. He remembered the day they first found the rift, the day everything changed. He had almost died and she had screamed for him. And the rift had answered. The violet pulse washed over them again, warm, gentle, beckoning, like a hand reaching out. The girl staggered forward. He grabbed her wrist. No, it's not trying to take me, she cried. It's trying to take you. Another tremor nearly knocked them both over. The earth beneath them cracked open, inches away thin at first, then splitting wider. Violet fire glowed from the fissure, reaching upward like grasping fingers. The boy pulled her back, holding her against his chest as the ground ripped itself apart. It wants me, he whispered, stunned. It says you survived when the rift tried to claim you, she said, and now it wants to finish what it started. He stared at the widening crack, the light reflecting in his eyes. For years, he thought the rift had marked her. For years he feared for her, but all along, it's been after me, he whispered. The violet light intensified, swirling upward in a tornado-like column. Stones levitated. The ground rippled. The air shook. The rift's pulse synced with his heartbeat, thudding, pounding, demanding. The girl clung to him desperately. Don't let it take you, please. Don't leave me. He cupped her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. I'm not going anywhere. You can't fight it, she cried. No one can. Maybe not, he said, raising his spear. But I can choose how I face it. The rift roared a sound like all the world's storms unleashed at once. The boy stepped in front of his sister as waves of violet energy blasted across the valley. But instead of resisting, he lowered his spear's tip toward the ground. I'm not running anymore, he said. If it wants me, then let it speak to me, not through you. Her eyes widened in horror. No, you don't know what it will do. I know, he said softly. It won't stop unless one of us answers. The wind howled. The rift pulsed faster. The world trembled. He stepped forward. She screamed his name. The rift's light surged, and then, suddenly, everything stopped. The wind froze. The trees stilled. The trembling earth went silent, and a voice not hers, not his, echoed across the valley. "You took her from me." The girl gasped. "Brother, it's not talking about me." He turned slowly. She stared at him with wide, shining eyes. "It's talking about your sister."